In this video tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to complete a break-even chart. Now, break-even is the point where your costs and your revenue are being matched, right? So basically, you're making as much money as you're spending. So you're neither making loss nor you're making profit. You're exactly everything you're spending is being met by what's coming in. And beyond that point, obviously, is where we start making a profit. And the break-even point itself is a measurement of how many units or how many items the business needs to sell in order to be at that stage where the costs are being met by the money coming in. And obviously, if we know the break-even point, we know how many items we need to sell to break even, then we know what we need to be selling in order to be making a profit, which is obviously a level beyond that. So it's a really important thing for business to understand how to do. And a lot of the exam questions I've come across in the past ask you to plot a break-even chart, which is one alternative way of finding break-even points without just using a formula, which you'll obviously already have done. So we're looking at exam style question 3 from the revision pack, and I've got a small table to complete firstly before we can even go on to making the chart, which I've kind of pre-prepared on the next page, just ready to put the lines in. So how we do this is pretty straightforward. The first thing I always do with a break-even chart is I go for fixed costs. And fixed costs are the costs that don't change depending on the amount of units being sold. So each column here represents the amount of units being sold. What's the costs involved if we sell 0 units? What are the costs involved if we sell 30 units? And what are the costs involved if we sell 60 units? Fixed costs will be the same for 0 units, for 30 units, for 60 units, because fixed costs literally represent things like expenses, like staff wages or rent or utility bills. And if you look here, their fixed costs are £180 per week. So we're going to put 180 in here in the fixed costs row. And as you can see, regardless of how many items they sell or how many units they sell, they're always going to be spending £180 per week. So even if they sell 0, they're still spending £180 on their fixed costs, which, as I said to you, are things such as expenses like bills and staff wages. Okay, then the variable costs are £6 per family. So at 0 units, we're not spending anything in terms of variable costs. At 30 units, at £6 per family, we are spending £6 times 30. So 6 multiplied by 30 to get £180. So the variable cost at 30 meals being sold is £180. And at 60 is obviously that times 2, so £360. So there are variable costs. Remember, it's the cost per family or cost per meal times how many meals sold. And when we talk about variable costs, we are talking about costs to the business, not to the customer. So it's costing the business £6 for every family they see. And obviously we're multiplying that by the amount in each of these columns. So this is 30 meals sold, this is 60 meals sold. Okay, now we're looking at the sales. So the family deal is £15 per family. Again, if we sell none of them, we're making no money. So this sales is what the business is making. £15 per family at 30 families is going to be 15 multiplied by 30 for that column there. So we're going to get £450 being taken in what we call revenue. And if this is over the period of a week, obviously it's a weekly turnover of £450 if we serve 30 families. If we serve 60 families, it's going to be £900 because it's that £15 times 60, which is 900. And I've just cheated, I've doubled 450. So that is how we work out the sales revenue, what we're taking on the till, the variable costs, what the business is spending in order to sell 30 units or 60 units. Obviously, spending nothing in order to sell 0. And the fixed costs, the money the business has to spend to keep running, regardless of how many items are sold. So that's how we calculate the costs and the values we need in order to put into the break-even chart. Finally, we need a number for total costs where we're adding the variable costs to the fixed costs. So we're adding these two together to get the total costs. So here it's £180. Here we're looking at 180 plus 180, which is 360. And in this particular column, when we're selling 60, we're adding 360 worth of variable costs to £180 of fixed costs. So 180 plus 360. We end up with £540. So these are the total costs, as I said, for each level of sales unit, each volume. So 30 sold or 60 sold. What we do is we're adding the variable costs to the fixed costs at each particular volume of sales. Right, so now we've calculated that, we can actually use this numeric data to create a graph, a chart. And I've kind of got one already with the pieces ready to go. And the first thing, again, I'm going to use is the fixed costs. I always start my break even with fixed costs because it's a really straightforward baseline level. We know the fixed costs are £180. So I'm going to grab the fixed cost line and I'm going to find 180. If you notice, these are in increments of 20. So £20, £40, 60, 80. So I'm going to put that on this particular line here. Slap bang in the middle of that. And it's going to be 180 no matter how many units are sold, even at 30, even at 60, because we've got that on the table above. £180 for all of them. And I've labelled the line for, oh sorry, this isn't fixed costs, this is total costs, what I'm doing. Fixed costs on the line for 180. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here, because it's going to be easier to do that. %200%. Might be a bit more difficult to see, but I just want to make sure I'm getting the line correct. So, here we are, yeah, that's fine. Making sure my fixed is on the line for 180. There we go. So that's my fixed costs, as you can see, added there. Now I'm going to go to the previous page, and I don't want my variable costs, although we've used them as in terms of calculating everything. We only want the total costs. So the total costs are added on top of the fixed costs. And if you have something without total costs part of the table, you still need to work them out because it makes it easier for you. So one thing I need to be aware of is at 30, at a volume of 30, the total costs are going to be 360. So first thing I do with the total costs, I get this line here, and I'm going to start it at 0 on the y-axis at the point where the total costs is. Okay, so it starts on here at the same point as the total costs, 180, because if you look, so the fixed costs, the total cost starts at 180, even for 0 items sold. It's going to start at £180. So we scroll down here, £180 at 0 items sold. We now need to make sure, and I'm going to zoom out for this bit. Alright, so we'll go back to 100% again. I'm just going to break this out for a second. I grouped it, I'm going to ungroup it. This line here, for total costs, now needs to be at 130. Oh, sorry. At 30, it needs to be set to a certain value. Let's go and find the value again. It needs to be plotted at 360. And at 60, it's 540. So let's do that. 360. So it's around about there. 20, 40, 60. 360. And then let's go up to 540 for 60. It's harder to do on the computer. It's going to be easier for you to do this by hand. Let's just check. 30 is definitely at 360. It's hitting through there, no problem. Okay, so that's 360 there and 540 there. So that is your total costs. And as you note, they're added on top of the line for the fixed costs. So that's the fixed cost of 180, and then we've added the variable to the fixed to get the total cost line. At zero, at 0 items sold. This x-axis here, 0 items sold, 30 items sold, and 60 items sold, and they're plotted along like that. I made a bit of a mess of this, but hopefully it's starting to make sense to you. So that's our total costs, 360 and 540. And if I plot along that, starts at £180 on the 0 point. At 30, it's 360. And at 60 it's 540. So that's fine. Finally, we need to do total sales revenue. So that's sales. At 30, we're taking £450, and at 60 we're taking £900. So that's your sales revenue. I'm just going to ungroup this again, make it a lot easier. So take the green line, and let's have a look. So at a volume of 0 being sold, we are taking 0 money for sales. So we need to go down to 0 point and 0 point there. And then at 30 items sold, a volume of 30, our total costs are, our total sales revenue is £450. So let's plot to 450. Where are we? Right in the middle here. That's not for 30 though, is it? There we go. So 450 is right in the middle of the square there. Okay, and let's have a look again. At 60 items sold, it's then 900. So let's extend that all the way to 900 for 60 of them. And the line should have followed suit for the 30 being 450 sold. So £450 at 30 items. There we go. So let's put total sales revenue there. So we've got 0 and 0. 450 at 30 units sold. 30 units sold, £450. And then at 60 units sold, £900. And now we can calculate the break-even point, which is where these two meet. And as you notice, it's 20 items sold. So this one has a break-even point of 20. And that's how you solve that. It's pretty straightforward. So you've just got to make sure you calculate all this properly, and then make sure those three lines are put correctly. And the break-even point, as I said, is where these two lines meet. The total sales revenue and the total costs are meeting. We draw the total costs starting at the height of the fixed costs. We just follow the values on that chart. And it couldn't be simpler. I made that sound a bit more complex than it is, but it is really straightforward. And that's how to do a break-even chart.